Have you ever felt like you're shouting to the sky and all you get back is silence? Have you ever prayed until you ran out of strength with tears streaming down your face and still nothing changed? There is a pain that cannot be explained. It can only be felt, the one that arises when the heart cries out for God, but the sky seems closed. If this has ever happened to you, take a deep breath now, because this message did not reach you by chance. Jesus speaks to you, and today he wants to reveal something that most people have never understood, but you will. Imagine being alone, lying in the dark, hearing only the sound of your own breathing. The world outside keeps spinning, but inside you, everything is still. It's as if your soul is trapped in a windowless room, waiting for a voice to say, "I'm here. It's going to be okay." But that voice doesn't come, and that's where many give up. They think they have been forgotten, ignored, abandoned by God. But what if I told you that there was something hidden in that silence? That the absence of response does not mean the absence of presence. That silence, in fact, could be the sound of God preparing something greater. This truth has been ignored by many, but not anymore. Today, you are about to discover something that can completely transform the way you view pain, silence, and the presence of God. You are about to see how Jesus himself speaks, even when he seems silent. How he responds, even when everything inside you feels like it's alone. This is a powerful spiritual revelation. And it's not for everyone. It's for those who resisted, for those who are still here, for those who decided not to give up. For you, take a deep breath and open your heart, because what comes now may be exactly what your soul has been waiting to hear. And maybe the silence you are experiencing is not the end. Maybe this is the beginning of what God is about to say. Don't leave this video, not before hearing what he wants to reveal, because Jesus speaks to you, and he will today. Take a deep breath and open your heart to what is about to happen here. You are not alone at this moment. Thousands of people come to this video carrying the same weight, looking for the same answer, feeling the same pain. And if you're here now, it's because Jesus speaks to you, and he wants to reach places in your heart that perhaps no one else has reached. This message could be the beginning of something new in your life. Don't ignore this moment. It may seem like just another video, but something bigger is happening. There are people who will watch along with you, and perhaps what you comment below is exactly what someone needed to read to not give up. So if this word is touching your heart, write it with faith. I trust in Jesus. Declare this in the comments and allow your faith to strengthen other lives too. Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. If this message is speaking to you, click the like button. It's not just a simple gesture, it's an act of evangelization. When you click, you help this word reach more people who also need healing, direction, and peace. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. Because Jesus still has a lot to say to your heart. Remember, you are not here by chance. Jesus brought you here for a reason. Something important will be revealed, and you need to listen before leaving this video. There is a warning from Jesus that can change everything, and it is closer than you think. Stay with me, because now we're going to start seeing silence with different eyes. He was alone, not just physically, but completely alone inside. The dead children, the confused wife, friends absent or unable to understand, and the sky silent. Job sat in the ashes, covered in wounds, as the world collapsed around him. It was more than pain. It was the silence of God screaming louder than any human word. Have you ever felt this? When life falls apart and all you hope for is an answer, but what you get is a deep emptiness, an echo of nothingness, a deafening absence. It was exactly there, in this place where everything seemed over, that Job made one of the most profound statements in the Bible. He said, "Behold, if I go to the east, he is not there, and if I go to the west, I perceive him not. When he acts in the north, I do not see him. He turns to the south, and I do not see him. But he knows my way. If he tried me, it would come out like gold." Job 23:8-10. This is not just a sentence. It is a cry of faith in the midst of silence. It is a reminder that God's silence is not rejection, it is refinement. What almost no one understands is that there is a purpose behind what appears to be abandonment, because when everything becomes silent, that's when something begins to be built within us. Job didn't know what God was doing. He did not have access to the dialogue between heaven and hell. I didn't know I was being forged like gold in the fiercest fire, and maybe that's what's happening to you. Perhaps the absence you feel is not a real absence, but an invisible process of polishing, because Jesus speaks to you, even in silence. Especially in silence, and this is a truth that few realize, but today you will see it. Maybe you're going through a time when everything seems meaningless. Losses, anguish, sleepless nights, looking at the ceiling with a tight chest and a tired heart. Maybe you are praying but have no strength, trying to believe, but the silence seems to mock your faith. If this describes you, take a deep breath, because there is something that God is doing in you right now, even if you don't see it, even if you don't feel it. Job thought God was far away, but God was near, closer than ever. Silence was the setting for his purification, and maybe the same is happening to you. There is a lie disguised as wisdom that many repeat: time heals everything, but time alone doesn't heal, it just passes. True healing happens when the Holy Spirit enters our pain, not when the days pass, and sometimes, for that to happen, the sky needs to be silent. Because it is in silence that you learn to hear what no one else can hear. It is when the noise of the world ceases that God's voice begins to become audible, even if it is still a whisper. It is in this place of total vulnerability that he plants seeds that only brokenness can water. Think with me, what would your faith be like if God answered everything immediately? If every prayer came with a clear answer within seconds, perhaps your faith would not develop. Maybe you never knew the weight of his presence precisely in his absence. Job didn't give up. He chose to believe even without feeling it. He chose to trust even without understanding. And that was exactly what made him an eternal example, because true faith is not forged in miracles. It is forged in silence, in the dark, in chaos. If this word is speaking deeply to your heart, declare in the comments, "I continue to trust." Write sincerely as an act of faith. Your comment could be the relief someone needs right now, confirmation that they are not alone. Jesus speaks to you, and he can even use your testimony in the comments to touch other lives. You are not here by chance. This message reached you at an exact time. And maybe it's the confirmation you've been asking for in prayer. Even though the sky is silent, that doesn't mean it's empty. Even though God seems distant, that doesn't mean he is absent. There is silent work happening within you. And just as Job was molded until he shined like gold, God is molding you. It is refining your soul, polishing your faith, preparing something that you can't see yet, but that will make perfect sense when everything is revealed. If you've come this far and felt God speaking to you, share this video with someone who is also going through silence. You can be the channel that brings light to the middle of a dark night. And if this message touched your heart, click the like button. It's not just a simple gesture, it's an act of evangelization. That click could make that word reach someone who is on the verge of giving up. And if you are not yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe now and activate the bell. Not by algorithm, but by purpose, because Jesus speaks to you, and he still has a lot to say, but that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed, a pain that seems inexplicable, an emptiness that many people experience and don't even know why, and a lesson in adoration that few can apply when everything goes wrong. Get ready, because what you hear next could change the way you face suffering. He tore the cloak, fell to the floor, not to curse, not to complain. Job fell down and worshipped, that's right. He loved it. In the midst of the mourning of his children, the loss of his possessions, the perplexity at everything that was taken from him, Job still managed to say, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Job 1:21. It's impossible to go through this scene and not feel a shock in your soul. Because when we lose something, the most natural thing is to rebel. It's questioning. It's screaming. But Job loved it. And here is one of the greatest spiritual secrets ignored by so many. There is a form of worship that is only born when everything has been lost, when the ground has disappeared, when your chest feels heavy, when the sky seems silent and you still choose to say, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." This is not religion. This is raw faith, real, but transformative. How many times have you asked yourself why? Why did God allow that? Why did you have to lose so much so quickly? People, dreams, opportunities, stability, health. And suddenly, it seems like the world has become a hostile place. You look around and don't understand. He looks at the sky and it seems like God has looked away. And deep in your soul, that feeling of injustice, of abandonment, of being punished for something you don't even know what it is born. But the story of Job shows us that there is more than meets the eye, that there are pains that are not punishment, but refinement, that there are losses that are not destruction, but invisible reconstruction. Job didn't understand, but he loved it. He had no answers, but he had a choice to continue believing. And that's where faith becomes a bridge between pain and promise. Because loving when everything is going well is easy, but to worship when the heart is bleeding, that reveals a kind of faith that heaven does not ignore. And perhaps this is the faith you are being called to live now. Maybe the losses you faced are not the end of the story, but the beginning of something that can only be built after the desert. God is not oblivious. He's shaping you into something greater than you can imagine right now. What if I told you that what you've lost could be making room for something you never would have achieved if everything had stayed in place? Job didn't know it, but as he wept, heaven was betting everything on his faithfulness. And this same bet could be happening to you, because Jesus speaks to you. And sometimes he speaks in the silence of loss, in the absence that hurts, but always with a purpose that time will reveal. If this message is reaching something deep in your heart, write in the comments with faith, even in loss. I trust in you. It's not just a comment. It's an altar you raise with words. It is a way of declaring that your faith does not depend on what you have, but on who God is. And your testimony can strengthen someone who is on the verge of giving up. Losing hurts. It hurts more than any words can express, but there is a type of healing that only comes when you transform that pain into worship. And perhaps this is the time to transform your broken ground into a sacred place, a place where you say, "I don't understand, but I trust." Because the faith that survives loss is the faith that sustains miracles. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. When everything seems to indicate that silence is abandonment, there is a woman who dares to cry out and receives no response. But something extraordinary happens amid his persistence. Get ready, because what is about to be revealed will show that Jesus hears even the wordless cry, and what he does in silence is more powerful than any scream in the world. She cried so much that no words came out. Anna stood before the altar with her eyes red, her lips trembling, her heart exhausted. It was a cry that made no noise, but that shook the soul, a silent, desperate cry hidden for years. And the most distressing thing of all was praying and not having an answer, year after year, time after time. She wanted a child, yes, but what she really wanted was to be heard, be seen, be remembered. Because it was no longer just about motherhood, it was about identity, about rejection, about that chronic pain that gnaws away in silence and no one notices. How many times have you felt this too, when your prayer is said with everything that is inside you? But heaven seems to ignore it. The word says that Hannah prayed in bitter spirit, 1 Samuel 1:10, and still nothing happened. Have you ever thought about the level of pain that this phrase carries? A faithful, fearful, upright woman, but still ignored? While others got pregnant easily, she just waited. And it wasn't just the waiting that hurt. It was God's silence in the midst of it. It was seeing other people's lives moving forward while yours seemed stuck. Anna could have given up. He could have rebelled. But something inside her decided to remain. And that day in that temple, something changed. What no one saw was that silence was about to be broken in a supernatural way. But before the miracle came, what came was a judgment. The priest looks at her and accuses her of being drunk. Just imagine, praying in tears, waiting for acceptance, and receiving criticism. Does this remind you of anything? Perhaps you too have been judged for seeking God too intensely. You may have been ridiculed for keeping faith in the midst of pain. But here's the point. None of what you experienced was in vain, because Jesus speaks to you, and sometimes he speaks after the silence. Sometimes the response is not immediate because the process is activating something much larger within you. Anna responds to the priest with humility, and at that moment, without even realizing it, she was leaving the station of waiting for the time of promise. God's answer did not come in the form of thunder. It did not come with a glorious vision, but with a simple phrase, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant you what you asked for." And it was enough. She returned home with a transformed face, even though she was not pregnant yet, because something had already changed inside. The presence of God broke the silence. And shortly afterwards, Hannah conceived Samuel, the one who would be one of the greatest prophets in history. If you are living in a time when your prayers seem to go through the roof, write in the comments with faith, "Jesus hears me." Even if everything says otherwise, declare it out loud, like Anna did silently. Sometimes your confession is the seed of the miracle to come. And your comment could be the answer that another silent heart is waiting for to not give up. And if this message is touching your heart, click the like button. This gesture can take this word to someone who is at the end of their tether, waiting for a response. It's more than enjoying, it's being a channel of God's voice for other lives. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue receiving these soul-restoring messages, because Jesus speaks to you. And he still has a lot to reveal to your heart. Do you notice? Sometimes the most powerful prayer is the one said with tears and without sound. And it is there, when no one else sees it, that the sky moves. Anna didn't need to scream to be heard. She just had to stay. And perhaps what God is expecting from you today is exactly that. Not giving up now. But that's not all. There is a secret hidden in the cave where an emotionally exhausted prophet tried to give up everything. What happens there reveals a profound detail about how God speaks and what his silence is actually trying to say to your heart. Get ready, because what comes now will change the way you interpret the sound of silence. He ran not to escape an army, but a threat. A single sentence from Jezebel was enough to dismantle a man who had just faced hundreds of false prophets. Elijah had seen fire fall from heaven. He had prayed, and rain returned to the land after years of drought. But now, he just wanted to disappear. The same man who defied kings and multitudes was now hiding in a cave, tired, afraid, without direction. He was broken. And the most shocking thing is that there in that cave, he cried out, he asked for death. He said, "Lord, that's enough, take my life," not out of disbelief, but out of exhaustion. Elijah had reached his limit, and then God manifests himself. But not as Elijah expected, not even in strong winds, not even in the earthquake, not even in the fire. God's presence revealed itself in the soft whisper, a silence that spoke. A presence that didn't scream but healed. How many times have you felt like you needed to hear something strong from God? A clear answer, a glaring sign, something that ripped through the sky and gave you certainty, but all you got was silence. Or worse, it was something subtle, too calm to be interpreted as a response. Elijah expected the extraordinary, but God chose silence, and that says a lot. Because Jesus speaks to you, but not always in the way you want. Sometimes he speaks through the silence that forces you to slow down, to step out of the noise of fear, anxiety, guilt, shutting down the external voices to finally hear what the sky is whispering. Elijah's cave is the portrait of so many hearts today. People tired of fighting, but who don't want to give up their faith. People who love God, but don't understand why he seems silent. People who have seen miracles, but still feel weak. And this is where the most profound revelation comes. God did not respond to Elijah's anguish with explanations, but with presence. The whisper was the medicine. It was the invisible hug. It was the sign that God was still there. I still believed in him. I still had plans for him. Have you ever felt this way? Locked inside your own mind, wondering why God doesn't speak like he used to? Why did the signals disappear? Why did the fire stop? But what if what you interpret as absence is actually the transition to something more intimate? Because the whisper is for those who are close. God does not shout to those who are next to us. He whispers, and maybe, just maybe, what you are feeling right now is not distance from God, but his invitation to come even closer. If this word is reaching a deep place in your heart, comment right now, "Talk to me, Jesus." Write with faith as if you are opening your heart to hear God's whisper. Your comment could be the echo that a tired heart needed to hear today. Anxiety often arises from noise, from excess voices, from inner confusion, but the voice of God does not compete with chaos. She imposes herself in silence, in balance, on pause. And perhaps what you need today is not a new answer, but a new listening. The whisper is there. All you need is silence inside you. And if this message touched your heart, click the like button. This simple gesture can bring God's whisper to others who are trapped in the cave of anxiety. Your like could be the door to someone's healing. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell to continue receiving these words that are more than videos. They are encounters with presence, because Jesus speaks to you, and he still wants to say more. But wait, what happens next may change the way you interpret life's uncertainties. There is a moment in the story of a king when fear completely paralyzes his people, and the only response he receives from God is silence. But what he does in the face of this is something few would do, and the result: it will challenge everything you believe about decisions in uncertain times. Open your heart, because what comes now will surprise you. The enemy army was already on its way. Messengers arrived with news from all sides. Armed crowds were coming against King Jehoshaphat. It was a real threat, urgent, scary. And even though he was a leader, even though he was a man of faith, Jehoshaphat felt afraid. The Bible does not hide this detail. In 2 Chronicles 20:12, he stands before God and confesses, "There is no strength in us before this great multitude, and we do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." What a powerful statement. He didn't try to appear strong. He did not use human strategies. He did not seek alliances. He just recognized his limitation and chose to trust. But the most impactful thing about this story is what happens between the cry and the response. Nothing, no immediate instructions, no voice from heaven, just silence. And yet, he remained, waiting, in worship, in confidence. It's too difficult to make decisions when the sky is silent, when everything seems urgent and God seems absent. This is when many people rush in. They run after human exits. They give in to despair, but Jehoshaphat did not. He called the people to fast, to worship, to wait. He didn't pretend everything was fine. He just decided that trust in God was stronger than fear of the crowd. And this is one of the greatest teachings of this story. God's silence is not a sign of abandonment. Sometimes it is the necessary environment for our faith to grow in the dark. How many times have you been in this same position, when everything around you says, "Decide now, do something"? You can't wait, but God says nothing. Not a sign, not a direction. And you find yourself there, in the midst of anxiety, trying to understand if you are doing the right thing. Jehoshaphat shows that there are times when the best move is to stay still, not out of cowardice, but out of conviction, because when God has not yet spoken, his silence is the instruction. Standing, trusting, and keeping your eyes fixed on him, that is faith in its purest form. And then, when the people decide to praise in the midst of uncertainty, something extraordinary happens. God's answer comes not with swords, but with praise. The enemy is confused. Opponents destroy each other, and Jehoshaphat and his people win without raising a weapon. This completely breaks human logic, because we often want to act, react, control. But there are situations that can only be overcome with adoration, with inner silence, with fixed eyes, with faith that resists even when God seems silent. If this message speaks to you, write in the comments with faith, "My eyes are on you, Lord." Declare this as someone who surrenders the anxiety, the rush, the confusion, and chooses to trust. Your comment could be the right word that another afflicted heart needs today. This story is a reminder that spiritual wisdom is not always knowing what to do, but knowing where to look when you don't know. Jehoshaphat looked up, and maybe now that's exactly what you need to do. Stop trying to take everything into your own hands. Stop running. Take a deep breath and lift your eyes. Because Jesus speaks to you, and sometimes he speaks when you decide to be silent. If this message touched your heart, click the like button. This gesture could convey this word to someone who is about to make a hasty decision. It can be the salvation of a distressed soul. Click and be a channel of peace. And if you haven't signed up yet, sign up now and activate the bell to continue receiving messages like this, which not only speak to the heart, they touch the soul. Jesus speaks to you, and he will continue to reveal deep things to your spirit. But that's not all. What you're about to hear could completely change your perception of abandonment. There is a moment in history when even the Son of God himself shouts out to the Father in the midst of silence. What happens there is proof that even the darkest silence can hide a divine promise. Get ready, because the revelation that comes now will shatter everything you believed about feeling forgotten by God. The sky was dark, not just on the horizon, dark within the soul. The Son of God was hanging on a tree, alone, injured, bleeding, and at that moment, not even the angels spoke. No answers, no consolation, just silence. And then, with his breath ragged with pain, Jesus cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. That cry echoed through time. It is one of the most human phrases that Jesus uttered, because there, at that moment, he did not speak as Messiah. He spoke like someone crossing the desert of abandonment. And maybe this is the scream you've been carrying in your chest for a long time, but you're afraid to voice it. Have you ever felt like you're doing everything right, but God still seems far away? Have you ever had days when you prayed, trusted, waited, and what you received was the weight of silence? It is difficult, it hurts. It gives you the feeling that there is something wrong with your faith, as if he were doing something that offended God, as if he was turning away. But then, why did Jesus go through this? If he was perfect, if he was the beloved Son, why was heaven silent when he needed it most? Because God's silence is not always absence. Sometimes it's confirmation. Sometimes it is the highest point in history. Jesus was fulfilling humanity's greatest purpose, and yet he felt abandoned. But it wasn't. The Father did not abandon him. He was fulfilling a greater plan, which would only be complete with that silence. And that's when everything changes. Because perhaps the silence you are experiencing is not punishment. It's confirmation that you are exactly where you're supposed to be. Experiencing something that you still don't understand, but that will make sense. Can you imagine Jesus' pain at that moment? He bore the sin of the world, the injustices, the traumas, the faults that were not his. And at the height of this pain, what do you find? No comfort, no intervention, and yet he didn't give up. He continued. He trusted until his last breath. This reveals something profound. Faith is not the absence of pain. It is persistence even when the pain seems unbearable. It's trusting even when the sky is silent. How many times throughout your life have you cried out to God? Not with your voice, but with your heart. And how many times when doing this have you felt as if you were speaking to the void? This experience of Jesus reveals that this is not spiritual weakness. This is humanity. It is sacred vulnerability. And the most shocking thing is that God's silence with Jesus did not last forever. On the third day, the answer came. The stone has been removed. Life won. Heaven broke the silence with the greatest of all declarations, the resurrection. This teaches us that even when God is silent, He is acting. He hasn't forgotten you. If you have ever experienced this type of silence, a deep, lonely, confusing, write here in the comments, I cried out, but I trusted. This statement is not just yours. She could be the breath that another broken heart is waiting to carry on. Your comment could be the comfort someone needs today. The pain Jesus felt on the cross has the power to transform the way you view abandonment. Because He was not spared the silence, He went through it for you. So that today, when you feel this way, you know that you are not alone. Jesus speaks to you. And even when you don't hear His voice, you can feel His love sustaining you in the unseen. There are mysteries in silence that only the broken heart understands. And perhaps that is where God is closer than ever. Now take a deep breath. Close your eyes and imagine this scene, the dark sky, the echoing scream, the body suspended on the cross. Everything seemed over, but that was just the beginning. What if the pain you feel today is not the end, but the prelude to your resurrection? What if silence is not absence, but preparation? Jesus knows what it's like to feel pain. He knows what it's like to not hear an answer. And because of that, He knows exactly how to reach you now. But that's not all. What you're about to discover will change the way you see everything, because there is a psalm that was born exactly from this place of deep pain. A song written by someone who, like you, reached rock bottom, and even there decided to talk to God. What this psalm reveals is something so intimate, so true, that it could be the key to understanding what you are experiencing today. Get ready, because what comes now is not just another word, it's a reunion with your own soul. He walked through memories like someone walking on broken glass, the wounded soul, the spirit in tatters, the eyes filled with a tiredness that didn't just come from insomnia, but from the inner struggle of someone who wants to believe, but no longer has the strength to even talk to God. The psalmist, author of Psalm 42, was not unknown to the faith. He knew the altar, the temple, the songs, the presence. But at that moment, none of it made sense. What he says with cutting words is exactly what many today hide behind smiles. Why are you downcast, O my soul? And why are you troubled within me? Psalm 42:5. It is the prayer of those who can no longer pray. There are days when you just don't know what to say. The pain is so much, the fear is so intense, the silence is so absolute, that your prayers become just tears. You try to open the Bible, but it seems to stare at you with blank pages. You sing praises, but you can't even sing. And when you close your eyes, what you find is the echo of your own confusion. The heart shuts up because it is exhausted. And when this happens, the doubt arises. Does God still hear me? Has He left me? But Psalm 42 shows us something radically opposite to this thought. It shows that even the men and women closest to God go through deserts of silence. That the soul can be silent and still continue to be loved. That pain is not a sign of an absence of faith. It is fertile soil for a deeper, rawer, truer faith. The psalmist does not ignore his pain. He doesn't pretend that everything is fine. He places the soul against the wall and confronts it with a choice. Hope in God, for I will yet praise Him. How many times have you tried to be too strong, when in reality what you needed was just to rest? How many times has spirituality been demanded, when what God wanted was vulnerability? There is power in tiredness when it is surrendered to Jesus. When you say, "Lord, I can't do it anymore," that's when he responds, "I never expected you to make it on your own." The psalmist understood this. He didn't expect a voice from heaven, an instant healing, or an angelic vision. He waited, even in silence. He praised, even while crying, and that changes everything. Because Jesus speaks to you even when your heart is too tired to pray. His voice does not need to pass through your lips. It whispers straight to your soul. The Spirit intercedes for you with inexpressible groans. He translates your tears into prayers, your sighs into cries, your silences into communion. This is not theory. It's a living promise. When you are silent, heaven continues to listen. If this word touched silent parts of your heart, comment now. Even in silence, I believe. Your comment could be the bridge between someone who is about to give up and the hope that is reborn in the midst of pain. Don't underestimate the impact of your statement of faith. She can be the echo of God's voice to another weary soul. And perhaps that's the most powerful part, when you stop fighting to appear strong and surrender as you are, with the pains, the fears, and the emptiness. That's when the sky tilts. God never demanded perfection from you. He wants truth, and the truth often is a heart without words, but full of desire for him. A spirit that doesn't know what to say, but continues searching. Jesus understands what it is like to have a tired soul. He spent nights in solitary prayer. He cried drops of blood. He was misunderstood even by his closest friends, and yet he didn't give up. Not because he was immune to pain, but because he knew the value of sacred silence, the silence that heals, that transforms, that prepares. Imagine now for a moment Jesus sitting next to you. He's not talking, he's just there. Gift. Following every beat of your heart, every confusing thought, every painful memory. He is not demanding prayer, fasting, spiritual performance. He's just with you. Because presence speaks louder than words, and when his voice is silent, his love continues to scream. Maybe you're trying to hear an answer when really you just need to feel the company. And that's what Jesus wants to give you today. Company, consolation, peace. He is the good shepherd who does not abandon even when the sheep has lost the strength to scream. He goes to meet you. He carries you on his lap. It gives you your breath back. But this is just the beginning. Because what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. There is a story in the Bible that reveals chaos unfolding before a single word from Jesus. It wasn't screaming. It wasn't a storm. It was a whisper, and the impact of that whisper was more powerful than any thunder. Get ready, because what comes now will calm not only the winds around you, but especially those that blow inside your chest. Jesus and the disciples were crossing the sea. The day had begun with teachings, healings, miracles, but now everything had become chaos. The skies closed in, the winds began to blow furiously, the waves rose like walls. The boat rocked violently, and the disciples, men accustomed to the sea, panicked. They screamed, ran from side to side, trying to control something that was out of control. And in the middle of the storm, Jesus slept. Yes, I slept, lying in the back of the boat on a cushion. The scene borders on incomprehensible. How can anyone rest when everything seems to fall apart? How can there be peace in the midst of chaos? They wake him up terrified and ask the question that carries the pain of so many afflicted souls. Master, do you not care if we perish? Mark 4:38. Maybe this is the same question that hides inside you today. Lord, don't you see what's happening? Don't you care about my pain? Why are you silent while everything in me screams? The storm around is so noisy that it seems to deafen the voice of God. And when he doesn't speak, the heart begins to imagine that it has been forgotten. But then Jesus stands up. With the same calm as someone sleeping in the middle of a storm, he stands up. Don't panic, don't argue. He does not react to the storm with fear, but with authority. He looks at the wind and the sea and says, "Calm down, wind, silence, sea," Mark 4:39. And suddenly, Everything was calm. The noise stopped. The water calmed down. Chaos was tamed by the voice of the one who created it. Now look at this. Jesus was not absent. He was present all the time, even in silence. His presence was the answer that the disciples still could not understand. And it's like that with you too. When everything inside you is at war, anxiety, fear, insecurity, despair, it seems like God is far away. But he is on the boat. He didn't jump. It didn't leave you adrift. He is there, even if sleeping in your eyes, active in love before eternity. His silence is not abandonment, it's security. This story is not just about Jesus calming a physical storm. It's about him calming the storm inside you. Because there are winds that blow inside the mind. There are waves that rise within the soul. There are screams that no one hears, but he hears them, and when he speaks, even chaos obeys. The storm is not the end. It is the stage of revelation. It was in that raging sea that the disciples discovered who Jesus really was. And perhaps it is exactly in your deepest pain, in your most distressing silence, that you will also discover who he is. If this word is reaching you in the middle of a storm, comment below, Jesus, calm my sea. Your confession could be the beginning of peace, and your comment could be the answer someone is waiting for to keep fighting. Have you noticed that after the storm stopped, Jesus turned to his disciples and asked, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Mark 4:40. The issue was not about his power. That was already clear. The issue was about trust. Faith is not the absence of fear. Faith is trusting even in fear. Faith is staying on the boat even when everything inside you wants to jump and run away. Faith is remembering that Jesus speaks to you even when the noise of the waves tries to drown out his voice. And here's something few realize. The miracle wasn't just that the storm stopped. The miracle was that Jesus remained. Remain even in the face of doubt, the accusations of the disciples, their lack of faith. Jesus did not abandon ship after they doubted. He stayed. He followed them to the other side. And he will also follow with you, even if you question him, even if you don't understand, even if I screamed at the sky. He will follow you to the other side of the pain, the anxiety, the confusion. You don't have to fight alone to weather this storm. You don't need to try hard to control everything, to understand everything. Sometimes all you need to do is stay in the boat and trust that he is there. Because when Jesus is present, even chaos bends, and that's exactly what we'll talk about next. There is a type of waiting that seems to never end, a promise that takes so long to fulfill that the heart begins to faint. But what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. Abraham looked at the starry sky, and each point of light seemed to mock the promise that had not yet been fulfilled. The years had passed like leaves blown by the wind, and Sarah's womb remained silent, empty, immobile, like the desert that surrounded them. God had spoken, I promised. But time screamed otherwise. Hebrews 6:15 accurately records what many forget, and so, waiting patiently, he obtained the promise. But what happens when patience turns into pain? When does waiting become such a burden that it suffocates faith? That was exactly where Abraham was, between what God said and what has not yet happened. And that place, that space of silence and delay, is where many of us are right now. Waiting in itself is difficult. But when waiting is combined with God's silence, everything intensifies. The fear of having got it wrong comes. Guilt comes from thinking that perhaps you did something to prevent the blessing. There comes the despair of watching time pass and nothing changes. There comes the pain of imagining that God has changed his mind. But what if I told you that what you were taught about God's timing is incomplete, because waiting is not punishment. Waiting is the laboratory where God molds invisible warriors. God's promise to Abraham did not depend on human time, but on divine faithfulness. And that is exactly what God's silence invites you to see. He is not late, he is preparing you. The wait you experience today may not be for the birth of a child, but perhaps for a cure, an answer, a liberation, a reconciliation, a direction. And what hurts isn't just the delay. It's not knowing if what you're hoping for is still in God's plans. It is at this moment that the heart begins to doubt, but it is also at this moment that faith needs to be louder than fear. When everything seems at a standstill, God is still working. When nothing moves around you, the sky is still moving. You don't see it, but the invisible is being shaped with the power of the word that never fails. Abraham had moments of weakness, of doubt, of human attempts to speed up the process. But God did not give up on him, and he won't give up on you. Maybe you feel like Sarah, laughing inside at the possibility of the impossible. But God's voice still echoes, even when it seems that the promise has expired. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Genesis 18:14. This question crosses time and reaches you now. Is there anything that God cannot do for you? Is there any deadline that he cannot break? Is there some miracle that time has already cancelled? No, because Jesus speaks to you even when time seems to say otherwise. If this word found you in the middle of a long wait, write in the comments, "I trust in God's timing." Your testimony of faith can light a flame in the heart of someone who is about to give up. You may not understand why it takes so long, but you can trust whoever promised. Abraham waited, suffered, he questioned, but he didn't give up, and at the right time, not in his time but in God's time, the promise arrived. Not with noise, not with an announcement, but with the cry of a baby that changed everything. Isaac was the materialization of divine faithfulness. And your miracle will also come as long as God wants, in whatever way he chooses, and at the exact moment that will be best for you. Because while you think you are standing still, God is positioning everything in the invisible. God's silence during waiting is not empty. It is loaded with eternal intentions. It is in this silence that he builds in you something greater than what you are asking for. He's not just preparing the promise, he's preparing you to receive it. When everything seems too quiet, remember, the sky is in construction mode. And when God speaks, everything is fulfilled. But that's still not all. There is a type of silence that hurts even more than waiting. It is when you cry out for answers, but only receive silence as an echo. And what happens next could change the way you see everything. Habakkuk got up that morning like someone with a scream stuck in their throat. The anguish was already well known. God's people were surrounded by injustice, and God silent. The prophet felt crushed between the clamor of the earth and the silence of heaven. He didn't just want a miracle, he wanted an explanation. "How long, Lord, will I cry, and you won't listen to me?" he asks with a torn heart. It is in this moment, between the clamor and the empty echo, that many of us also find ourselves. When you kneel waiting for an answer, but all you hear is the sound of your own breathing. Habakkuk 2:1-3 records the turning point. "I will stand upon my watchtower to see what the Lord will say to me." And that's when something powerful happens. It wasn't God who remained silent. It was Habakkuk who needed to stop to really listen. How often in our anxiety for answers have we moved so much that we hear nothing? We try to open doors by force, fill the silence with our own voices, with other people's advice, with distractions. But there is a type of response that only arises in silence, a type of direction that only arrives when the soul calms down. God had not remained silent with Habakkuk. He was waiting for the prophet to stop, climb the tower, and learn to listen with his heart, not just his ears. The vision was coming. The answer was on the way. But before that, some waiting time was necessary, a time that seems like punishment but is healing. If you've ever felt like Habakkuk, standing in a field of questioning, waiting for God to say something, anything, to calm your heart, then this message is for you. Because Jesus speaks to you even when everything around you seems silent. He speaks through the word, through a simple prayer, through an unexpected song, through a sudden memory that strengthens you. But to hear it, you have to climb the tower. Silence the noise of fear. Stay away from the rush. Habakkuk climbed the tower because he knew, even if it seemed like God was taking a while, he would come. And what God answered was surprising. The vision is yet to be fulfilled at the appointed time. If it delays, wait for it will certainly come. It will not delay. It seems contradictory. If it delays, it won't delay. But that's how heaven's time works. For us, it takes time. For God, it is preparation. If this word spoke to you in the midst of the silence, write in the comments, "My answer is on the way." You never know who else needs that encouragement. There is a type of faith that is born in the absence of signs. A faith that does not depend on external confirmations, but is fed by what God has already said before. This is what Habakkuk sustained. And that's what can sustain you. Even without seeing anything changing, he decided to believe. Even without hearing God's voice as he expected, he decided to remain in the tower. Don't come down from your tower just because the answer hasn't come yet. Stay. Wait, the vision will come. And when it arrives, everything that seems confusing today will make sense. It will reveal the purpose behind the silence. Because what God is building is bigger than the answer you want. It's the kind of faith that sustains you until the end. But that's not all. There is an even deeper secret about hearing God's voice, and it is hidden in the story of a boy who learned to distinguish the divine voice in the midst of mental confusion. What comes next could change the way you see everything. The temple was silent, but the boy, Samuel's heart was boiling with confusion. He was still young, too small to carry so much weight, but he already lived in the center of a heavy atmosphere, where God's voice seemed to have fallen silent. The Bible says in 1 Samuel 3:1 that in those days the Lord spoke seldom, and visions were not frequent. Imagine growing up in an environment where everything should be sacred, but God's silence echoed louder than any song. Eli, the priest, was old and distant. His own sons despised holy things, and Samuel just served. I obeyed. I expected, but that night everything would change. A voice called him, a voice he had never heard, but it still sounded familiar. He runs to Eli. "Did you call me?" And the answer is as frustrating as it is confusing. "No, go back to bed." This happens 3 times. And how many times in your life have you felt like you heard something from God, only to discover that maybe it was just your mind trying to make sense of the chaos? A confused mind is fertile ground for deception. But it is also in this field of confusion that the Spirit whispers. Don't scream. Don't force it, just call. "Samuel, Samuel." And when Eli finally realizes that this was God trying to reveal himself, he tells the boy, "If he calls you again, answer, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" This phrase became key. Samuel didn't hear any more voices. He learned to identify the source. The secret was not natural hearing. It was the position of the heart. Hearing God's voice begins with an inner posture of surrender. You may be in the midst of noise, surrounded by voices, criticism, fear, anxiety, comparison, insecurity. But when you say, "Speak, Lord," you silence the world and make room for heaven. If this word touched something deep within you, declare in the comments, "Speak, Lord, I'm listening." This could be the answer that someone next to you is also waiting to read. Maybe you identify with Samuel. Perhaps you are in a season of life where everything seems dry spiritually, where those who lead you have failed, where references have collapsed, where the environment that should nourish you spiritually has become a field of silence. But still, Jesus speaks to you. In the midst of mental confusion, anguish, internal doubts, he calls you by name. And when you answer sincerely, something changes inside you. That night transformed Samuel from a servant to a prophet. God's silence gave way to continuous revelation. From then on, says the word, the Lord continued to appear in Shiloh, and there he revealed himself to Samuel by his word. There is a hidden secret here. God was not silent. He was just waiting for a willing heart. The voice of God is not external noise. It is an internal whisper. And often to listen, you will need to turn off the world around you and allow the Spirit to speak from the inside out. Close your eyes now. And imagine Jesus calling your name like Samuel, just you and him. Speak, Lord. I'm listening, but that's not all. There is an even darker pain that confuses the soul, when you feel so much that you don't feel anything anymore. And the divine answer to this emptiness comes in the form of tears. Get ready. The revelation that follows may shatter something inside you, only to rebuild something much stronger. Martha held her brother's body while her eyes stared at the invisible. Maria, kneeling beside her, had her lips sealed in pain. The crying was no longer a sound. It was suffocation. It was as if the soul had screamed so much that now only emptiness remained. Lazarus was dead. The smell of death already filled the air, and with it the feeling that God had not come. Jesus had been warned. They had cried out. They had trusted. They had waited. But nothing. What to do when you believe? And death still comes. When you pray, what comes is silence. When what invades you is no longer pain, but the absence of feeling anything. Jesus wept. John 11:35. Two words that seem simple but hide an explosive revelation. The Son of God, the living Word, the Alpha and the Omega, wept, not because I didn't know what to do, not because he didn't have the power to resurrect, but because he felt it. He felt the pain that no one could express anymore. He felt the absence that broke his heart. He cried out of empathy, for love, by presence. His voice did not break the silence immediately. First he wept with them. Have you ever felt this? Have you ever experienced internal grief, where what died perhaps wasn't even a person, but a hope, a promise, a part of you? And in that place of emotional numbness, where everything inside you has gone silent, you ask yourself, God, where were you? The answer may surprise you. He was crying with you. Before saying, Lazarus, come out, he allowed himself to feel everything that Martha and Mary could no longer put into words. Jesus speaks to you even when you no longer have the strength to respond. He is in the midst of mourning, in the dark room, with eyes swollen from crying and a soul that has stopped trying to understand. If you are experiencing this kind of silent pain, write in the comments, Jesus, stay with me. This simple phrase could be the breath that rekindles someone's hope. And now, listen carefully. There is power in a divine tear. Jesus didn't just move, he acted. After the crying came the voice. And it wasn't a soft or symbolic voice. It was a cry, a command against death. Lazarus, come out. The same Jesus who cried with you is the one who calls you out of the cave. He understands the emptiness of pain, but doesn't let you sink into it. He enters your silence to be sound. He joins your tear to be healing. Maybe you're in that place where you don't feel anything anymore, where everything seems too heavy to even try to pray. But know, the silence of your soul does not silence the sky. Jesus speaks to you even when you no longer speak, and more than that, he acts. He resurrects, he restores. What is dead today may still hear his voice tomorrow. Close your eyes now and take a deep breath. You are not alone. Jesus is there, and he is crying with you just to let you know there is still life even after the pain. But that's not all. There is a pain hidden behind the guilt, that feeling that God abandoned you because you deserved it. The next story will rip that lie apart. Get ready, because what comes next will change the way you see everything. He no longer saw himself as a son. He no longer remembered his father's hug, nor the joy that once surrounded him. He saw himself as dirty, miserable, unworthy even of being called a servant. In his mind, there was no way back. What was left was shame. And yet, he started walking, one step after another, not knowing if I would be rejected or humiliated. In the heart of the prodigal son, there were no more words, just the weight of someone who believes he is being punished by God. But he didn't know that on the other side of the road there was a father running. Luke 15:20 says, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and, filled with compassion, ran to his son and hugged him and kissed him. This scene changes everything. Because it shows that God is not waiting for you with judgment, but with haste. He runs. Run even when you stumble. Run even when you think the punishment is what you deserve. How many times have you thought that the suffering you experience is the result of a mistake? That God is silent because He is punishing you? That the absence you feel is a kind of divine justice for what you did or didn't do? These voices are the same ones that keep so many people away from the presence of God. But Jesus talks to you to deconstruct this lie. The Father is not idly waiting for you to drag along in guilt. He has His arms open, His eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to run towards you on the first move back. This story is not just about regret. Talk about reconnection. The son wanted to ask to be treated as one of the workers, but the father didn't let him. He didn't leave because the son's identity is not erased by mistake. It is not lost with sin, does not dissolve over time. The Father's love is deeper than His deviations, and He doesn't need a speech. He just needs your return. If you have ever felt unworthy to pray, to seek, or even to be here listening to this message, write in the comments, "Father, I am coming back." This sentence can be more than a comment. It can be the first step back home. And now take a deep breath and allow yourself to feel this truth. You are not being punished. It is being expected. You are not forgotten. He is being watched with tender eyes. You are not at the end. You are one step away from a new beginning. The pain you feel is not a punishment. It is a calling, an invitation from heaven. The silence that feels like condemnation may actually be the very moment the Father is running to you. He runs, even when you can't run back. And here comes something even more impressive, the love that forgives you. Also sustains you in the battles of faith, because there are times when it is not sin that keeps you from God, but the fear of failure. And what happens next will challenge everything you believe about doubt and faith. The wind was strong, the waves were beating furiously, and fear was already taking over Pedro's heart. He had taken the first step. He had dared to trust. He had done the unthinkable, stepping out of the boat and walking on water, but all it took was a moment of distraction, a second of doubt, and everything fell apart. He started to sink. The cry came out in a desperate, desperate tone, "Lord, save me." And then there, in that very moment of weakness, Jesus reached out His hand, not to judge, but to lift up. Matthew 14:30-31 says, "But when He felt the strong wind, He was afraid, and beginning to sink, He cried out, 'Lord, save me.' And immediately Jesus stretched out His hand and caught him and said, 'O you of little faith, why did you doubt?'" This is not just an account of a miracle. It's about what Jesus does when His faith is under attack. When the storm comes from outside, you protect yourself. But when it starts inside you, what do? When does the mind conflict with faith? When does insecurity start to scream louder than conviction? When do you feel like you no longer believe like you used to? That you no longer have that spiritual strength that seemed unshakable? Maybe today you're feeling exactly like this, trying to follow, trying to trust, but sinking in the middle of the process. And the cruelest thing is that in this place, shame appears. Self-demand screams, religion points. But Jesus extends His hand. Man of little faith. He didn't say, without faith. Jesus saw what faith remained in Peter, even if it was small, even if it was weakened, and that was enough to rescue him. The enemy wants you to believe that to doubt is to fail, that to fear is to fail. But Jesus speaks to you to remind you. His hand reaches out not when you are strong, but when you are sinking. Help comes in the midst of weakness. And more than asking you for courage, Jesus gives you presence. If you have ever felt your faith being attacked, write in the comments, "Jesus, hold my hand." Sometimes this sincere sentence is all it takes to start over. And your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. Now imagine, the wind was still strong. The waters did not calm immediately, but Peter walked again, not alone. With Jesus, sometimes you don't need the sea to calm down. You just need to feel that God's hand is still there, even if your faith is shaking, even if your prayers are weak, even if your soul is exhausted, even if doubt tries to dominate. Jesus' love is greater. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. The faith that today makes you cry out in the midst of fear is the same that tomorrow will make you testify. Because doubt does not define your identity. The fall does not cancel the call. The storm does not cancel the promise. You may be sinking, but Jesus still calls you by name. And what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. Because there is a hidden secret in the way God sees you, even when you doubt. At the moment when everything seemed to fall apart, Gideon was there, hiding, kneading wheat in a winepress. An inappropriate place, which reflected exactly how he felt. Out of place, cornered, pressured. The people were being massacred by the Midianites, and hope seemed dead. He looked around and saw no way out. Inside him a question burned. If the Lord is with us, why did all this happen to us? Judges 6:13. God's silence was heavy, and the inner voice only said one thing: you are not strong enough. You are not good enough. You are not enough. But it is precisely in this state of fragility, fear, and confusion that the angel appears. And it says something completely different from what Gideon believed about himself. The Lord is with you, mighty man of valor. Judges 6:12. Do you notice the contrast? He saw himself as weak. God saw him as a warrior. And that's the essence of when Jesus speaks to you in the midst of silence. He doesn't just answer your questions. He redefines who you are. Because while pain makes you question your worth, God calls you to purpose. How many times have you wished to hear a single sentence that would bring relief? A simple, everything will be okay. Just that, not a theological explanation. Not a distant promise, just a sweet certainty that what you are living has an end. And most importantly, that you are not alone. Gideon didn't ask for signs of war. He just wanted to know if there was still hope. And perhaps today you are exactly like that. Fighting internally against voices that weaken you, wishing deep in your soul that God would interrupt this silence with a touch of affirmation. But here's the wow moment. The angel didn't wait for Gideon to be strong before calling him a warrior. He did not wait for the battles to be won to say that God was with him. The identity that heaven releases upon you does not depend on your opinion of yourself. It depends on the truth that God has already established about you. If you desperately need to hear that everything is going to be okay, comment now, God sees me differently. Sometimes the first step to winning the internal battle is to declare out loud what heaven has already whispered to your spirit. Your comment may be just what another broken heart needs to find today. And here comes the twist that transforms everything. When Gideon, still insecure, still afraid, decided to obey, even though he didn't feel ready, it was in this movement that miracles began to happen. Sometimes you don't need to wait for faith to arrive to take the step. You need to take the step for faith to flourish. There is a hidden truth in this meeting between the angel and Gideon, and few realize it. God does not appear to remind you of what you have lost. He appears to activate what is still alive within you. And even when all you want is to hear everything is going to be okay, what Jesus says to you is even deeper. I am with you. Because the greatest comfort is not in knowing what will happen. It is in knowing who is with you, and what you're about to discover will change the way you see everything. Thomas was there, listening to his friends saying, "We have seen the Lord." But inside, something in him screamed, "No, it can't be. This is too good to be true." What should generate faith only increased their distrust. He couldn't celebrate nor rejoice, because the pain of loss, fear, and doubt spoke louder than any testimony. How many times have you felt this way? Surrounded by people who believe, but carrying an emptiness inside that no one sees. And it was in this exact place of disbelief that Jesus appeared. He didn't reject Thomas. He didn't yell at him, didn't condemn. He approached. He extended his hand. He showed the wounds, and he said, "Do not be unbelievers, but believers." John 20:27. This is God's language with those who are sunk in doubt. It is not a cry, it is a presence. It's not an accusation, it's an invitation. And maybe today you also need this Jesus who approaches, not to prove anything to you, but to touch your soul in a way that no human argument can. Because Jesus speaks to you, even in the silence of your most difficult questions. The ones you don't even dare say out loud. Doubt in itself is not the enemy of faith. What kills faith is the absence of space for encounter. Jesus knew that Thomas didn't need logical answers. He needed a real moment with him. And that's what changes everything. This is why you can be full of uncertainty, but still be on the path to revelation. Thomas' doubt did not keep him away from Jesus. It was the bridge for him to be personally reached. Doubt is only dangerous when you decide to stay in it alone. But when you allow Jesus into that space, he turns doubt into a declaration, my Lord and my God. If this message spoke directly to your soul, comment, Jesus, enter into my doubt. You don't need to pretend to be strong. You don't need to hide your insecurity. Be honest in your comments. This transparency can spark faith in other hearts that are also wavering. And here's the part that few realize. Thomas was the last to believe, but he received one of the most powerful revelations of all. He didn't just see the resurrected Jesus, he was the first to call him my God. Doubt, when confronted by the presence of Christ, produces a deeper, more personal, truer faith. Not decorated, not copied, but born from a real encounter. So, if you feel that your faith is weakened, if your mind is tired of so many unanswered questions, if your soul is wavering, don't blame yourself. Don't run away. Jesus is closer than he seems. He's ready to show his marks, to extend a hand, to lovingly say, it's me. Don't be afraid, and what you're about to feel will change the way you see everything. In the valley, everything was silent. The wind cut through the dry air as Ezekiel observed a landscape of death. Bones scattered everywhere. There were many. They were very dry. The cracked ground no longer supported life, and the sky seemed mute. The prophet was there not by choice, but because God took him to that place. And then the question came, Son of man, can these bones live? Ezekiel 37:3. Ezekiel's response was not a cry of faith, it was a humble whisper, Lord God, you know. It was as if he said, I no longer have the strength to believe, but you have the power to transform. How many times have you been to this valley, where everything around you screams the end, but your soul still holds a spark of hope? You look at your spiritual life, your dreams, your emotions, and everything seems dead, dry, forgotten. But it is in this scenario that God likes to speak. That valley was more than a physical place. It was a mirror of the soul of many who, like you, feel spiritually dead. Have you ever tried to pray and nothing came of it? Have you ever tried to worship but felt no presence? Have you ever tried to seek direction, but the only return was the echo of your own loneliness? Jesus speaks to you even when everything in you seems silent, because when your mouth is silent, God still hears the groaning of your spirit. And then God sends a surprising command. Prophesy over these bones and say to them, dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Ezekiel 37:4. Notice, the bones didn't have ears, but the voice of God pierces the impossible. She speaks where nothing else responds. It penetrates what no one else touches. She creates life where there was only absence. That's not just a nice metaphor. That's what he wants to do today, now, with you. You may have lost heart. You may have left prayer aside. You may even feel that you are past the point of return, but there is a sound from heaven coming to meet you. And this sound doesn't require you to be strong. He just needs you to be willing. God did not tell Ezekiel to gather the bones, nor breathe life. He just said, speak. And if there's one thing you can still do, even when you're weak, it's open your mouth and declare, Lord, I still believe. If this message touched your soul, comment now, Lord, blow on me. Sometimes all we need is a breath, one touch, one word. Your comment could be the beginning of the resurrection of someone who reads and thinks they are alone. But no one is alone when God enters the valley. And the twist is this: the bones moved. They got together. They created meat, but they were still lifeless. And God commanded more: prophesy to the Spirit, because it's not enough to appear alive on the outside. It's the Spirit of God that brings life on the inside. Maybe you are living by appearance, going to church, giving glory, but inside a valley today, the breath comes inside. Not to show you a religion, but to rekindle a relationship. What you're about to feel will change the way you see everything, because when God speaks, even dry bones rise up like an army. And if He's talking to you now, it is because there is still a war to win, a mission to fulfill, a future to live. It's not over. Jesus speaks to you, and His voice revives what seemed impossible. Jeremiah was exhausted, not physically. The weight was different. It was a tiredness that started in the soul and spread throughout the body. He had dedicated everything he had to obeying God's calling, but the reward seemed to be only rejection, ridicule, and loneliness. Instead of seeing transformation, he saw doors closing. Instead of applause, I heard boos. Instead of support, silence. He had been thrown into the cistern, unjustly accused, forgotten by those who were supposed to protect him, and in one of his darkest moments he explodes, "I will no longer mention the name of the Lord, nor speak any more in His name." Jeremiah 29. That's where he decided to stop, to give up, shut up. But something unexpected happened. But His word was in my heart like a burning fire, shut up in my bones, and I am tired of containing it, and I cannot. Have you ever felt this way? Who did everything right, prayed, fasted, served, and in return only received silence? Have you ever felt the urge to say, "No more, God. I can't take it anymore"? It's not a sin to feel this way. It's human. Jeremiah, the chosen prophet, felt this. And in this exact moment of almost abandonment, Jesus speaks to you, because God is not offended by your pain. He enters into it. And even when you think you no longer have the strength to continue, the word still burns, still lives. It still whispers inside you. There is a type of tiredness that cannot be resolved with a night's sleep. It's the kind that comes when the soul is at war. When you look around and don't see fruit, you don't see progress, you don't see a way out. But listen to this: silence does not mean absence, and tiredness is not the end. God's voice may be silent outside, but it remains lit inside. She refuses to die. She doesn't let you give up because she knows what will still be born from your fidelity. And it is at this point that something extraordinary happens. When Jeremiah tries to remain silent, the fire of God speaks louder. The prophet does not preach out of force, nor out of obligation. He preaches because he cannot contain the truth that consumes him. What you are about to realize will change the way you see your pain. Sometimes God's silence is what awakens the fire that was already in you. He didn't delete it. He only backed away for a moment, so you realized he was already carrying something too powerful to ignore. This fire does not come from emotion. It comes from presence. It does not depend on human approval, but on the certainty that you were marked by something eternal. The feeling of burning inside even when everything outside gets cold is a sign that God is still on the move. It's still building, He's still writing. If you have ever thought about giving up, comment now, "The fire is still burning," because sometimes just by declaring it, the Spirit rises in you again. Your comment could be what reignites someone who is on the verge of quitting. Jeremiah didn't come back because everything got better. He came back because he understood that God's flame is unquenchable. And today that same flame is touching you, but that's not all. Something even more powerful is about to be revealed. It was night. Not just outside the cell, but inside them. Paulo and Silas were injured, with their backs open from the lashes, their feet trapped in stocks, their bodies bent by pain, and the environment filled with the darkness of a Roman prison. It was the kind of darkness that doesn't just blind the eyes, but tries to swallow the soul. They had been faithful. They had preached, freed an oppressed woman, obeyed the voice of God, and the result was prison. For many, that was the end. But in that oppressive setting, something completely illogical, almost scandalous, happened. Around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners listened to them. Acts 16:25. They did not murmur. They loved it. And this is not just a historical narrative. It is a spiritual revelation. When everything seems dark and you see no way out, praise can be the key that opens invisible doors. Because true praise is not born from a perfect life, but from a faith that decides to believe even when it doesn't make sense. They were hurt, but they sang. They were trapped, but they prayed. They were at the bottom, but still looking up. Most of us believe we need to feel joy to worship. But what if worship is precisely what precedes joy? What if praise is not just a reaction, but a weapon? An answer to the darkness? At midnight, in the most unlikely place, when it seemed like no one was listening, Jesus spoke to them, not with words, but with an earthquake, with liberation, with response. God heard from heaven and decided to shake the earth because of a praise born of pain. Maybe you are living your inner prison right now, shackled by fears, traumas, diagnoses, abandonment, or spiritual fatigue. Maybe no one sees your chains, but they tighten. Maybe your emotional midnight has arrived and you think, God, where are you? But what if in the middle of this dark night, the Lord is saying, sing, even so. Praise, even though you are hurt. Because I am here, Jesus speaks to you when everything goes dark. He doesn't leave you in the cell. He enters it. And when you worship him there, not for the answer, but for who he is, something moves. Something shakes, something breaks, not by human strength, but by the power of the Spirit. If this message is touching your heart, click the like button so that others can also be blessed. And in the comments, write, I will praise even in the darkness. Because your praise could be the push needed for someone who is on the verge of giving up. Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. The presence of God in the prison was so real that not only did the doors open, but the chains of all the prisoners fell off. This is not a detail. It is a spiritual principle. When you praise in pain, you are not freed alone. People around you are also touched. Your sung pain becomes a collective miracle. To praise in the darkness is to declare, my God is greater than this cell. And here comes the most impressive part of this story. The room was full, but only one person seemed invisible, Maria. Invisible to those who were too busy, too anxious, too distracted. Martha ran from one side to the other, trying to impress with service, trying to control the environment, trying to make everything work out. But Maria chose to just be there, sitting, silent, at the feet of Jesus. While everyone else wanted to do things for him, she just wanted to hear his voice. And Jesus, seeing the restlessness around him, said something that echoes to this day like a whisper straight to the heart of those who are exhausted inside. Mary chose the good part, and it will not be taken away from her. Luke 10:42. Maybe you are currently living like Martha, accelerated, pressured, overwhelmed by expectations, trying to solve everything on your own, trying to please everyone, trying to keep everything in order, but deep down all your heart wants is to stop, breathe, to sit, and listen. Because in the noise of the world, in the demands of life, in the confusion of emotions, the soul screams for silence, by direction, for real rest. Jesus speaks to you not when you run, but when you stop, not when you try to control everything, but when you surrender. The peace you seek isn't in what you do, it's in who you choose to listen to. Maria understood this. She didn't want a blessing. She wanted the presence, and that changes everything. When was the last time you simply stopped to be with him? Not to ask, not to understand, not to resolve, but just to be, just to listen. Martha's anxiety is a reflection of our generation, doing, proving, running. But Mary's stance is the response of someone who understood that there is only one place where the soul finds peace. And it is at his feet that's where the noise stops. May the heart calm down, that the mind slows down, that the spirit whispers. It is there that you hear what the world can never tell you. You are loved. You are seen. You are safe. You belong. Jesus speaks to you when you decide to silence the world to listen to heaven. And this choice, according to Christ himself, will not be taken away from you. In other words, everything can change around you. But what you receive at his feet remains. If this word found you in the midst of chaos, write in the comments, "My peace is at the feet of Jesus." Because what you declare today could be the fresh start that your heart is waiting for. Your comment could be the encouragement someone needs today. And if this message spoke to your spirit in a profound way, don't keep it to yourself. Share. May this word find other tired hearts, other noisy souls, other lives that have not yet discovered that true peace cannot be achieved if you receive it, and it is given by a single voice. Jesus speaks to you, and he is calling. Can you hear it? If you've come this far, it's because there is something inside you that screams for healing, for direction, for a fresh start that can only come from heaven. And perhaps throughout this video, you realize that Jesus is not far away. He's closer than you imagined. In the silence that hurts, in the pain you hide even from yourself, he is whispering to your heart, "I am here." This video wasn't just a message. It was a meeting, an encounter with the one who knows your darkest thoughts and yet does not give up loving you. Did you notice? Every story, every verse, every biblical tear reflected what you yourself feel: abandonment, confusion, fear, doubt, wear and tear. But in each of them, the answer was the same: the voice that breaks the silence, the hand that rescues, the look that sees the pain behind the forced smile. Jesus speaks to you, and he chose today to remind you of that. So now, stop everything, because the time has come to seal that word with prayer. A moment just for you with God, a conversation between you and the Father, where heaven touches earth and the soul finds rest. Take a deep breath, close your eyes if you can, and let these words invade your soul. Lord, at this moment I place before you every life that watched this message. You know the thoughts no one hears, the tears no one sees, the battles no one understands. May your voice now break the oppressive silence that scares. May your presence fill the voids. May your love cleanse the deepest wounds. Father, free from anxiety, doubt, emotional paralysis, restores the faith of those who are about to give up. Blow your spirit over the downcast hearts and show that there is still life, there is still promise, there is still purpose. May the fire of your presence rekindle where there were only ashes. In the name of Jesus, amen. If you prayed with us, if this message spoke to your heart, then you need to see the next video that is appearing here on the screen. What's there? It could be exactly what was needed for your healing to be complete. Don't ignore this chance. Something powerful is waiting for you. If this message touched you, if it was a response to what you are experiencing, then click the like button. Your like is a sign of gratitude and an instrument that can make this word reach more people who are struggling right now like you. Comment now. I made it to the end. This is more than a sentence. It's a testimony. You went all the way because there is something new being generated within you. Your comment could be the boost someone needs to keep going. Share this video with someone who needs to hear God's voice today. Be an instrument of hope in someone's life. You can be the channel of the transformation that God wants to make. And if you haven't subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel now. Not as an automatic gesture, but as someone embarking on a journey of faith, healing, and revelations. Here you are not alone. You are part of a community that walks together, that cries together, that grows together. Every week, new words that could be exactly the answer your heart is waiting for. Those who look upon him are radiant with joy. Their faces will never show disappointment. Psalms 34:5. You have not been forgotten. You are not alone. You are seen, loved, and called. Jesus speaks to you, and he still has much more to reveal to you. So click on the video now. Why, what you will hear there could be the beginning of your complete liberation. Don't ignore this last opportunity. Go now, heaven is waiting for you.